Welcome one, welcome all, and welcome to the Excellency Light League. My name is Finnick, joined on the desk today by Mac. And first off, we must apologize for the lack of the award show tonight. Zephyr and Obubi unfortunately could not make it, and we thought it would be best for them to do it as they are the voices of the Light League. However, filling in for Zephyr tonight is myself, Finnick, and filling in for Obubi is Mac. How are you feeling as we get ready to go with the first set of the night?
You know, feeling really good about this one. We have Degenerates that are going to be trying to get in and actually confirm their spot in playoffs, even though Florida State already has. So we're looking at a pretty close matchup, but it's certain to be hype.
Indeed, it should be a close matchup. We actually have never seen these teams play against each other. If you guys might remember back in week number 1, we had a whole debacle where, unfortunately, Degenerate Esports Reformed had to forfeit their match due to a missing player at the time up against Florida State Esports. So we don't have a head-to-head to go off of. However, what we do know is both these teams like playing around the top side. Later tonight, though, we have Merciless going up against Redefy Unleashed. Merciless are the only other team in contention for the playoffs besides Degenerate Esports Reformed. Degenerate Esports currently holds a 2-game advantage over them, and because Merciless is not playing in the first set of the night, we won't know exactly how that playoffs picture will go unless Degenerate Esports wins 3 games. If they win 3, they're guaranteed in no matter what. But first, they have to beat Florida State Esports here. Records are close. They both like playing around the top side. What are we looking for picks-wise as we get ready to go with the game number 1 draft?
You know, certainly one of the most contested picks that we're going to be seeing is the Thresh. Both of these supports actually seem to be playing quite a lot, and it opens up picks like Kog'Maw and Aphelios to be much more viable to be picked, which the AD carries actually seem to play a fair bit of. And then in the top side, we have some carry threats like Camille picks that come in, which offer counter picks such as Lucian to come in, as well as safe side Gangplank that could be options. But looking through the top side is going to be specifically from Pandemonium and Kaz for the Florida State team. And then we also have Hot S'mores in the jungle, who could look to have some power picks with champions like Kha'Zix. But we're definitely going to be seeing some high tempo clear junglers as we see the Kai'Sa and Lilia bans. So the Lilia bans makes a lot of sense. You're banning something that has very high prio in the early game, one of the strongest junglers. Kai'Sa as well, one of the strongest AD carries. The Victor ban, you're banning away safety and scaling, as well as someone who can pressure in the levels 1 through 3. So we have some fairly solid and basic bans coming in for the first 3 bans.
Nico also being banned away here. This one definitely a little bit more targeted towards Flame Shadow, as she's not really super high in priority as far as meta mid laners are concerned right now. It still has a very good teamfight ultimate in that Pop Blossom, and you know anything plat and below, we typically prioritize comfort over what's considered meta, right? Diamond's really kind of when that meta becomes super important, unless there's a super broken pick like the Udyr or like the Hecarim, right, in that jungle. Udyr not quite as high priority as it was a couple patches ago. However, we might still see him. And in fact, we got the red side ban out from Degenerates Reformed. First pick from Florida State might tell a bit. Seraphine and Udyr banned away as far as priority picks are concerned on this patch. However, they might come up with something tricky here. Maybe the Hecarim first pick.
Yeah, I think the Udyr ban and the Lily ban go really well together. You're sort of funneling them into picking that Hecarim, and there it is. And the Seraphine ban is just really good because she's such a strong pick that can be flexed between the mid and support role generally, as well as a little bit in AD carry.
But for the time being, we look towards the counter picks here. Probably going to be either support jungle or ADC support here from the side of Degenerates Reformed. We'll see what they want to pick up here. Plenty of strong bot laners still on the table at the moment. You have the likes of the Jinx Lulu combination that are on the table that's been super popular in these plat leagues. Skarner, though, going to be the pick here. I quite like it. It's been very strong consistently over the last couple of patches, and it will be jungle support. Thresh, as you mentioned, a contested pick this series.
Yes, and one thing to note on the Skarner Thresh combo is obviously when Skarner can ult, he can get lanterned back and then just pull someone very far away. It's a little bit difficult into a champion like Hecarim, who does have his ultimate to get away, but both of these are very highly contested junglers right now, and the support, obviously being Thresh, is very highly contested between these two teams, of course.
Yeah, Morgana might be the pickup here from Florida State. In fact, There it is. You pick a Thresh, you expect the Morgana. Caitlyn, not necessarily the highest priority right now, so we're not expecting a Caitlyn Morgana lane. Perhaps something like Morgana Jinx or Morgana Tristana. I think Tristana's been very, very strong right now. However, they're going to blind pick the Galio, so this is a double flex technically. Morgana could go mid or support, same thing with the Galio. I don't like blind Galio mid, so I'm hoping that they're actually taking this Galio support and it's Morgana mid. Regardless, it's going to be up against the Bird if this is locked in, and as an Anivia fan, I would rather lane against the Galio than the Morgana. I hope this is Morgana mid if you're a Florida State fan here.
Yes, of course. I think the Galio pick does open up something like Camille, which Degenerates should be looking to ban. Obviously, that combo is very strong, and there we see it immediately. And the Anivia counter gives super dense wave clear into the Morgana or the Galio matchup, either way. So once Anivia hits that level 6, she can get hard shove in and then move around the map a little bit with her Skarner. Not much, obviously, because she's an Anivia, but
yeah,
we'll be able to farm up into the mid-late game.
Yeah, and pre-6, Anivia still beats Galio, right?
Yes.
Less so on Morgana. Morgana actually has much better tools to deal with Anivia than the Galio. The reason being that it's very, very easy to prep for the Galio when he decides to go in for his basic, just minging, clearing combo of the auto Q or whatever of that nature. And his Justice Punch is super telegraphed. You can put a wall down if you take it level 3. Most Anivias will take a second point in E. However, if that's Galio mid, I want to see Crimson Veil adapt and take that wall level 3 here. That said, more bans coming out. It's the Senna, it's the Silas. Banning towards that top side, it's hard. Stuck Brother does play that champion as well as this Ashe. So 80 carry picks still on the table for both teams, and it's going to be started off with the Xayah Thresh.
Yeah, so the Xayah gives a lot of safety into the Hecarim and the Galio with her ultimate, and if you run something like an Ultimate Hunter or you're getting extra Cloud Drakes, it actually makes it very difficult for this team to dive onto you. As well as being paired with the Thresh, you're an extremely safe lane, even though you might not be the most oppressive, and if it is the Morgana support, you don't really have much kill threat in that lane. Whereas the Tristana, being paired with either Galio or Morgana, if a binding gets hit or a taunt gets hit, you have so much kill threat in this lane pre-6, there's not much that the Xayah can really do to prevent that.
Indeed, that is the case. I think Tristana is one of the highest priority AD carries we've seen this patch in both pro and in amateur play because she's a double flex, typically being played towards that bot side, but technically a double flex. Actually could be a triple flex depending on who's your top laner, but I digress on that point. And the blind pick Malphite here. So I see a blind pick Malphite. I'm never a huge fan of it because it can be relatively easily countered by an AP top laner. However, when you look at the damage profile coming in from Degenerates Reformed, I think they need another AD player, a bruiser. Maybe they go for the double weak side matchup, but they need something strong. Instead, going for the Kayle.
Yeah. So we can see that Degenerates really want to scale here.
Yeah.
But one of the clear issues is that with Malphite, Hecarim, Galio, there's so much engage and so much follow-up on their engage that it makes it very difficult for a champion like Anivia to play, as well as the Kayle. So without Kayle really having a super crazy AD carry threat, as the Xayah is more of a safer carry on her own, she doesn't have that many great ultimate targets, but I definitely think that it's a fine pick to scale up in a vacuum against the Malphite. It just maybe doesn't fit the composition extremely well. It does give more survivability. So if she does ult Anivia, it's very helpful. But it's certainly something that allows them to have even more scaling, even though they might not be able to pressure in the early game.
I think the issue, though, when I see this draft coming in from Degenerates Reformed, right, this is a gold league, not a plat league, right, is they drafted kind of towards that split push angle with the Kayle. And generally speaking, when we get below plat, split pushing is a lot harder to do just because it requires a level of team communication that you typically don't see from a gold squad. That said, if they want to go with the Kayle split push angle, they can certainly do that. But I'm also concerned they don't have any obviously winning lanes. Yes, Anivia is good in the Galio or Morgana, but Anivia doesn't win lanes. She just doesn't lose them. The only winning lane for Anivia is up against Vladimir. And you see, or like I always say, technically there are other winning lanes, but you know what I mean. But at the same time, bot lane, you're up against this Tristana Galio combination, and yes, you have a very safe bot lane, and the Xayah and the Thresh, you have quite a bit of disengage with the Flay, But pre-6, this is very, very scary, and you have a Hecarim who's able to make level 4 ganks, whereas Skarner kind of wants to power farm early. So I'm concerned by Degenerates Reformed draft that if they end up losing the bot lane specifically, they will have a very, very tough time coming back into this game.
Yeah, and we do end up seeing that the Galio's going mid, which means there's going to be Morgana support. So it gives a little bit worse of an early game for them, but it means that the Galio is going to be an actual threat in this mid-late game, and the Morgana is just going to be more focused on utility, which does give them a bit stronger of like mid-game team fighting comparatively, but it does hurt their lane phase a little bit. But obviously, if the Morgana does hit a binding, it's the same effect that if Taunt goes off from the Galio in the bot lane. If that happens, and even if Hecarim's not there, they'll dumpster the trade just because of how strong Tristana is as a champion. And there's definitely some gank opportunities open in this bot lane for the Hecarim, earlier than the Skarner, of course, because Skarner does want that farm. We shouldn't really be seeing them focused around topside too much, even though that might have been something we thought prior, just because Malphite, Kayle, they aren't going to be super crazy early game champs that you need to get ahead. You just don't really want the Kayle to fall behind, and Malphite's fine with falling behind.
Yeah. And I don't think there's going to be jungle pressure topside, which is what we kind of expected going in, because both these top laners like playing towards that strong side, at least in solo queue, right? So seeing this kind of is a little bit surprising to me. I mean, yes, I've been producing for the last however many weeks, or for the last 6 weeks or whatever, but sometimes it's just like, oh, wait, they can play the weak side, right? And seeing that and seeing how the team from Degenerates wants to scale, I guess we can kind of transition this to win conditions, right? Top lane not going to be the focus. It's going to be the bot lane from Florida State. I don't see a focus position for the Skarner. There are no obvious lanes to gank, no obvious lanes to pick, so they're going to be playing towards team fights late. Win conditions, I think Florida State at the moment is looking for that mid-game win condition while Degenerates are looking for the late game. But when you look at the landing phase, I think Florida State has the easier road to win this game.
Yeah, for sure. So Florida State has a very easy time in this situation because they're going to be able to get that bot prio, and then they're going to be able to transition that into getting dragons for that mid-game spike when they're so strong at team fights with the Malphite, Galio, Hecarim. They just have so much follow-up, so much burst, so much engage that it's very difficult for Degenerates to actually play this game out. And they're going to have to really focus on either having that Kayle be a real threat on the split push, or get these Skarner picks in and out before these dragons are spawning, when people are still kind of setting up for the dragons. Because if they're able to get those picks, then it does make it harder for Florida State, obviously, to enter in and make these fights happen. But it's definitely a much easier win condition for Florida State to get these dragons ramping up and to get these mid-game team fights rolling in with how good their engage is.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think we both favor the Florida State draft here. However, we mentioned, look for that split push for Degenerates, look for the late game scaling. If things are even going into the mid game, how do we expect Degenerates to kind of play against this Florida State comp?
So going into the mid game, if it is even and everyone's doing okay, we expect that Florida State should probably have 2 dragons going into mid game just because of how strong their bottom lane is and how much prio they'll have over the Thresh and the Xayah. They're super safe, and if they ever do trade, they should be winning out on these trades. So because they'll have those 2 dragons, Degenerates has to try and contest those, or be those third and fourth dragons, or they'll be trading something on the other side of the map. So if their Kayle is able to have 1 to 2 item spike and actually be a threat in that side lane over the Malphite, be farmed up, doing very well for herself, then she can actually pressure in that side lane, force Malphite to catch waves and then do a teleport play or something along those lines, as well as just forcing down the Malphite in that side lane, taking those turrets, pressuring Florida State to really go hard in on those team fights that they're so good at.
Yeah,
but it's definitely a very winnable state for Degenerates if they're able to get into that later stages of the game and it's not completely blown wide open for them.
Indeed, I agree with you there. Something else to kind of look for, I think, is when you have a Kayle split pushing in the side lane, watch for how the Skarner is positioned for rotations, right? Skarner is a very powerful pick champion. If you go in for the 1-4 and you can find an inside track with the Skarner, or once he has his kind of 2-item power spike, you can look for, picking out a Tristana on the rotation or picking out a Hecarim on the rotation, and they have plenty of burst with the Xayah and with the Anivia. Doesn't surprise me out of bursting, though she's more a DPS-oriented mage, to potentially force uneven fights. So we'll look for that from Degenerates Reformed. That said, we're going to go to a quick break as we wait out the remainder of the spectator delay. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of the Excellency Light League. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and bees of all ages, welcome back to the Excellency Light League Week 7 matchup between Florida State Esports and Degenerates Reformed. My name is Finnick, joined on the desk today by Mac. We are just about loaded into game number 1 of the night. 5-point start from both these teams, and on the blue side, it is Florida State Esports with Pandemonium in the top lane, Kaz in the jungle, Flame Shadow in the mid lane, Rooster in the AD carry role, and Dump Truck 1738 in support.
Yes, and if we're looking at the Degenerate side, we have Hardstuck Brother, Hot S'mores 12, Crimvale, Fox Zero, and Flute Loops rounding it out as support. And one of the key things to note here in the item choice is the Corrupting Pot by Malphite. Going that with the Comet means that he's going to be trying to actually get some points into that queue and actually try to bully out this Kale in the early game.
It's pretty standard for tank Malphites to go that. Going for the Arcane Comet allows you to also take Mana Flow Band, and because your Q is just such a really nice spell in lane, you can get 250 free mana very, very easily. And as I mentioned, the Corrupting Potion helps accentuate that amount of pressure. That said, both junglers going to start on the bottom side. Expect a full clear coming in from the Skarner, as is kind of his MO. First gank's probably going to come up towards the mid lane for Kaz here on the Hecarim, though. We'll see if he decides to go for the full clear or the buff Grump start.
Yes, there's a couple different variations he can do. It does look like he's pathing towards his Krugs right now, and he's going to be doing something along the lines of a full clear. One of the key lanes that we should be looking at in this early game is the Tristana Morgana. Obviously, with Hail of Blades on Tristana, they're going to be super aggressive. They're going to be looking to take trades and actually get super good advantages, as well as leading that, transitioning that lead into early dragons.
And as you mentioned in drafts, we want to see Florida State get control of the first 2 dragons and take those. First one will be the Ocean Dragon. I believe statistically the best first dragon in the game. The regen really, really helps in lane. You just got to make sure to take that a little bit after it spawns, probably around the 6 or 7 minute mark. We see a nice trade bot side with the level 2 from Foxzero and Flute Loops. They should be able to win onto Dump Truck, who's forced to flash out of the way. But Flute Loops traded back quite a bit with Rooster and the bombs, as level 2 finally hit by Rooster. Dump Truck actually slightly out of range for that level 2 XP.
Yeah, and we saw that they just were able to get that level 2 and make a quick engage off it, while the Morgana still didn't have her Black Shield. And that's really what made the difference there in that trade, because otherwise the Tristana obviously would have very high amounts of damage getting that level 2 first, but they weren't able to do that, so Degenerates came out on top in that trade.
In the meantime, though, in the mid lane, Crimvale having a very nice time up against the Galio, and this is kind of what I was talking about when I saw the Galio and then the Anivia pick up. Anivia has a very, very nice time up against the Galio because Galio hates mages who have range and who can deal with his telegraph quite a bit. We see actually bot lane prio going over to the Xayah Thresh lane, not something to be expected on this, but definitely helped them out there. They just have to be careful not to greed for plays here, and it looks like they're going to back off for that. Well, top side, though.
Yeah, as we see a gank in top.
Yeah, it's a 2v2 at the moment. Hotsmore is down to 300 health, has to flash out of the way as Kaz is around and a level up. Not what I expected to see on this pick at all, as it is Skarner. He kind of wants to power farm up to level 4 or level 5 before he starts ganking. Something we didn't mention, though, and you mentioned during the break, phase rush on both these junglers, going to be chem tank for both of them.
Yeah, so we're going to see that tank Hecarim build where normally he's going chem tank into Deadman's, and then Skarner obviously going to be going the chem tank. One key thing is that since Skarner just burned his flash at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, he does have a little bit of a summoner spell's cooldown reduction from his runes, but it won't be coming up back until around 8 minutes and 30 seconds, which is after he hits level 6, so he won't have that instant spike to try and get on someone really unexpectedly.
At the same time, he also doesn't have it for this dragon, which is spawning in about 30 seconds here. We see the Hecarim towards the bottom side of the map, starting to pick up that Scuttlecrab and get priority. Kind of expected. That said, taking a look at CS, 33-17. The Xayah Thresh lane currently winning the bot side. Not something we expected in the vacuum here, but they are kind of pushed in. Maybe Hecarim can gank there after his next clear.
Yeah, and we see that Hecarim already has the Ionian boots, so he's definitely looking to try and get some ganks on repeat with his Ghost, because it's going to be at such a low cooldown that he'll actually be able to move around the map much quicker, and he'll be able to get these ganks off with very high value a couple different times in this early game.
Topside, though. First back coming in from Hardstock Brother. Head back in the lane, walking, saving the teleport for that ever dragon fight, but that does mean Pandemonium should have the experience advantage. Doves topside tower. Hecarim looking for a lane gank bottom, but Garner's here. Play. Going to get Black Shielded as Fruit Loops has to flash out of the way, rooted up by the Morgana in the Tormented Soil. Root lands from the Xayah. Dump Truck does not have flash, has to be very careful, but the Hail of Blades has already procced from Rooster. It's a disengage on the bot side.
Yeah, and we see another 3v3 where these junglers are meeting up, and in that case it actually does go a little bit more towards Degenerates in that back half trade after the Morgana got rooted. And again, this bot lane turmoil that we're seeing, where it's almost a 15 CS lead now, it'll even up a little bit more, getting closer to 10. But it's all because of that level 2 play where we saw the Morgana get chunked out so heavily because she wasn't respecting the fact that Xayah and Thresh were going to hit that level 2 mark before them.
TP coming in mid lane from Crimvale, though, as he's got the level 6. Same with the Galio, though, so you can look for that bot side as Rooster Buck shielded from that death sentence. As you mentioned, though, that level 2 paying a lot of dividends as the health bars definitely advantage Degenerates are formed, and they're able to take this back 34 mark. With that, Crimvale and Hot S'mores take first dragon. The opposite of the plan for Florida State Esports here, but unfortunately for them, they just will not be able to contest this objective at all. Hot S'mores, first dragon of the game. Next one will be the Infernal.
Yeah, and this is really quite a fantastic look for Degenerates, because even though they're playing this scaling comp where they really need to get to 2 or 3 items on most of their champions, they're actually able to get that early dragon, which is going to prevent the threat at that 15-20 minute mark where normally we're looking at that third dragon. They no longer have to worry about that because they got this first dragon, so they don't have to worry as much on that soul point.
Meanwhile, though, Hecarim invading on that top side of the map doesn't really have top prio, but at the same time, Hard Stuck Brother did back here. Did not use it to get back in the lane, so with that, actually losing out quite a bit. Kaz is towards his top side, might look for Hard Stuck Brother. He's ghosted up. Hard Stuck Brother knocked back into the Malphite ultimate. Onslaught of Shadows also pumped, and the first blood goes over to Kaz. Very, very nice heads-up play from Kaz there to pick up Hard Stuck Brother.
For sure, that was really well played. And one thing to note was their CC usage as we see a fight in the bot lane.
Maybe not. Rooster has to get out of the way. As Dump Truck still without flash, flayed back in, but now under tower as the hook misses.
Yeah, and that's 2 successful summoner burns for the side of Degenerates in this bot lane, where they really shouldn't be winning it, but just that level 2 gave them so much power that they were able to get a reset off first, get Prio back in the lane, and then they just take another great trade.
So you were mentioning around that top lane.
Yeah, so one thing to note there was that Malphite did the knock up immediately into Hecarim ult, so the Kayle didn't have time to use her own ulti.
That was very dirty bot side. Galio ulting down onto Kaz, dodged out by the Featherstorm, looking for the pullback, but he's taunted up. Flame Shadow picks up that kill as it's an AD carry for his support. Loot loops. Trouble 1-4. Damage to him. Able to make his way. Blast Cone. Kaz around towards the river, but oops. Long for the world needs to find a way back towards the Anivia as down. Skarner starting the Rectail in the meantime. Flash over, but he misses the Justice Punch and the taunt as well. Here comes Hotsmores. He has the Impale, finds the Hecarim, gets the suppression down onto Kaz, but there's not enough damage coming in for the Anivia quite yet. Pops the gold down, and Kaz barely stays alive as there was no wall from Crimvale to keep him in there. Flame Shadow dodging out. Rift Herald has not been taken. It has successfully been stopped, but Flame Shadow whiffing a couple spells on that Galio, letting Flute Loops get away with murder in the bot lane.
Yeah, that Thresh definitely should have faltered there, but the missed Justice Punch on that flash meant that he wouldn't get in range for the taunt. So the Thresh is actually able to get out, and then they almost turned it with the Skarner flash ulting, but Hecarim had just enough move speed to sprint away.
Hotsmore's a bit greedy. Pandemonium's already come down here. Bomb, rocket jump forward. Hotsmore should end up falling. Matters who gets the kill. Gets a stun down there. Trying to hand this over to the Tristana, but Kaz ends up taking it as the blast cone. Not quite enough for Hotsmore to get away.
Yeah, and one thing to note there is that Pandemonium did actually teleport, which means Kayle is going to be getting a lot of free farm, a lot of free XP, and some turret plating for herself, which is really good for her because obviously she wants to scale and be that side lane threat.
10-minute mark, though. We take stock of the gold lead. Only about 400, so the game is very, very close at the moment. Kind of where Degenerates Reformed wants to be, as, once again, the more games they win today, the easier their road to the playoffs are. And they wanted to be even or ahead by mid-game. Didn't really want to be playing from behind, especially in this bottom lane. And in fact, they're playing from ahead in the bot lane as we take a look at the gold. 800 up for Fox 0.
Yeah, and we can see the top lane, even though there has been a little bit of turmoil on the resets as well as the assists that the Malphite was given, it is even in gold. The biggest leads that we're seeing are obviously an 80 carry, which is 800 gold for Degenerates for the Xayah, and then around 1,000 gold lead, 1,100 gold lead for the Hecarim because he has those 2 great kills over the Skarner, as we see it engage in bot.
Nice hook bot side. There is a black shield, but unfortunately the burst damage is a little bit too strong. Flute Loops gets credited with that one. Rooster trying to get some damage on a Fox 0 in the meantime. Pops the summoner heal. Rooster rocket jumps away. There should be a couple of plates bot side. And that should turn into the second dragon as it spawns in about 20 seconds here.
Yeah, and that's really, really good for Degenerates, obviously. Normally they wouldn't have these situations, but they're just timing them so well around the objectives with them getting these great trades in. And they're using the flash that they burned earlier on the prior trade to ensure that they get that kill with the Thresh flash.
Yeah, mid-game fast approaching here, and the power spikes for the Galio and Tristana starting to swap. Obviously, Galio comes into play mid-game, and Tristana falls off mid-game before coming back up. The great V of power spike. Oh, no. With the Infernal Dragon taken, it's going to be Cloud Soul on the map. Degenerates are formed currently up with that early Dragon control, much to the chagrin of Florida State. And with that, I think they might actually be favored going into this mid-game. The Kayle's been having a fine time. The Anivia's only about 500 down on the Galio, and bot lane definitely definitely having a great time. Hardstuck Brother, though, might be in a little bit of trouble from Kaz. He's got the Onslaught of Shadows, but the Divine Judgment comes down. Onslaught of Shadows, unable to get the Fear as Hardstuck Brother had already flashed. Here comes Pandemonium, though. Flash into the Unstoppable Onslaught. And Pandemonia finally takes the kill. I'm sorry, Unstoppable Force. Unstoppable Onslaught and all.
Yeah, and that's actually very good because they're going to be able to drop this Rift Herald, funnel a bit of gold into that Malphite, and they're actually going to get this full turret, which is really good because you're getting that tank line that much stronger. And it really is on Florida State to make these plays because they don't want to get to this extreme late game with this Kayle that's super farmed up. And we're going to be looking for them to make more plays like that in the near future with the next Dragons, because if they are able to get this soul on the side of Degenerates, it would be bad for them.
Offsite fight happening. Rocket jump reset. Down. Crimvale, though, in trouble from the Galio in the mid lane. Xayah gets the root onto 2 members, though. Pops the Featherstorm, looking for the pullback. Stump Truck flashes out of the way. Flute Loops, though. Root up in the Morgana. Box goes down. Rooster in trouble as he's gotten the Feather pulled back, and Dump Truck falls. Double kill for Fox Zero in the bot lane in the 1v2.
Yeah, and we see that even though there was some mid lane turmoil, as we see a
Flame
flash.
Shadow in trouble. Gets the taunt down, but Crimvale finds the E, flashing out of the way, but he's got the egg. And unfortunately, the tower had the aggro as Kaz picks up the kill 1-for-1 mid lane.
Yeah, so in that bot lane skirmish, we saw that the Xayah was actually able to dodge out of a fair bit with her ultimate, and she was just so much stronger. She already had that Gale Force down, whereas Tristana still doesn't even have her Mythic even after that fight. So it was really just the amount of raw damage that Xayah was able to have. And then in that mid lane, we saw that there was a little bit of fighting between the Anivia and the Galio, but Skarner had ended up showing up first before the Hecarim got there. Skarner takes the dive. They were able to get the Galio, but then Anivia tanking the turret as the Hecarim follows in, and the Anivia falls for it 1-for-1.
Meanwhile, though, as we take a look at itemization, Fox Zero already has the completed Gale Force. Tristana moment. Completed Chem Tank on the Hecarim with Sunfire Aegis from Pandemonium, as the Hextech Rocket Belt is completed by Flame Shadow. Early boots from the Anivia, though, as she builds in towards that Leandri's event. Crimvale's not using the wall
we already
all that
have
much.
The Nashor's Tooth.
Yeah,
from the Kayle.
Yep.
So she'll obviously be getting very, very strong soon. And the Nashor's Tooth alone, even without its passive, has a very high gold efficiency, which is really important on a champion like Kayle, where you just want to get as much gold and as much efficiency in your stats as you can, so that way you're able to dish out that high DPS.
So something I noted loading in is Crimvale doesn't really have a mastery on Anivia, and it's kind of showing this game. Like, yes, technically not having a bad time against the Galio, but something I've been noting is Crimvale's not really been using the wall offensively. Something you want to be doing as Anivia, right, when you're going in for the trade, is you always put the wall behind the person that you're trading on. Because that way it guarantees Flash Frost and it guarantees extra damage coming out from your Glacial Storm. So, Crimvale, take some notes. Try to make sure you use the wall a little bit more offensively going forward. But we're into the mid-game. About 1,500 gold lead for Florida State. Get that off kills, but it's all on the tanks, though. Not really on their carry threat of the Tristana, who's actually down in gold. That can be very, very devastating if we come into a team fight.
Yeah, I mean, the follow-up damage just won't be nearly as high as it could be, because we do have this tank Hecarim, so even though he does have the kills, as we see,
nice
a
hook.
little skirmish.
It should be a dead Galio as Fox Zero picks up that kill.
Yeah, and again, they're doing what they need to do. They're finding these picks just before the objectives are spawning with that Skarner Thresh combo that we were talking about. And it's very impactful because now, with only 25 seconds until this dragon spawns, Galio is going to be spawning in 20 seconds. He'll have to teleport just to be able to get in range of an ult.
Indeed, however, speaking of the ult, Hero's Entrance is available once he respawns alongside the Unstoppable Force and the Onslaught of Shadows, so could see that combo come in that we were talking about in draft. However, with Dragon spawning, Kaz on the side, TP coming in from Pandemonium, or not from Pandemonium, excuse me, from Flame Shadow on the side of the fight. Inside track coming in from Florida State, but they River, so 5 showing up, but they are pulling off at the moment.
Yeah, and we can see how difficult it is for Degenerates to actually look in and try and get in this fight, because Hecarim and Malphite just provide so much of a zone that they don't want to face check into or try and move in through those small chokes, and so they just give up the dragon.
Yeah, a bit unfortunate for Degenerates Reformed, but they didn't want to take the 5v5 when this combo was up, and I fully get it. Maybe if they got that pick onto the Galio like 10 seconds later, they could have had that dragon, right? And it's one of these things, being aware of the death timer, right? So you get a pick right before an objective, you're like, all right, we can set up for this. But if the death timer's there, and they have the summoner spell, and they have the ultimate, then did you really accomplish anything with the pick? And the answer this time was, of course, no. As the game has slowed down in pace quite a bit from that early game.
Yeah, we saw a lot of different engagements that happened in the early game, a lot of different trades. And the fact that it's slowing down is very helpful for Degenerates, as we know that they have a very strong scaling comp with that Anivia and with the Kale. So they're going to be able to do some good work with this time that they've been given. And because they got those 2 dragons, they don't actually have to contest these next few drakes if they don't want to, and they can just allow themselves to get that 2nd and 3rd item spike on their carries.
Meantime, though, the more Vision team's gameplay towards the bottom side. Baron spotting at about 1 minute 20 seconds, but neither team can release Baron without winning a team fight for the moment. Pandemonium, though, caught out here by the Arner.
And burns the flash and ultimate to get away. So that won't be available for the next couple of minutes. Yeah, he flashed away immediately and then ulted.
Oh, well. That's fun. Oops, though. On in the top side. Fleeing away. Galio, kind of a waste of an ult there, as Fox Zero is around. Flute on half health, but he should be able to make his way out, or at least buy time, but Dump Truck's around. So dead support, top side, but 2 ultimates used for him. He's wasting a lot of time for this mid and part, as well as Kaz on the jungle. Flute Loop should eventually die. There's Kaz 4-0-2, but it's the tank Hecarim, right? Giving these kills to the Hecarim does nothing for your game at the moment.
Yeah, they're not funneling the gold as well as they could be into their Tristana, obviously, who's going to be their primary damage threat, aside from just the natural base damages that Hecarim and Malphite have. And they do have a lot of follow-up in high base damages, but it might not be enough because, as we know, we have the Kale ultimate to work through, as well as Thresh shielding through Locket and his W and Guardian, and there's a lot of different ways that we can see Degenerates actually surviving these initial engages, and if Tristana isn't there to have all that high DPS because she isn't as far ahead as Fox Zero is, then they can actually win these team fights, even though their team comp doesn't necessarily show that.
Meantime, though, Hardstock Brother has finally hit level 11 and now up to level 12, so important power spike for the Kale there. Obviously, not as impactful as it was before the ranged autos moved 6, but still something you gotta take. Have this Kale 2 minutes about until the next dragon spawns here. Crimvale. Got some damage in onto Rooster in the meantime. I would have liked to see the aggressive wall come out. There's Hot S'mores now. Looks to the Morgana, but the Black Shield there.
Yeah, and we can see that the Skarner does struggle a little bit into the champions like Hecarim and Morgana because they just provide so much anti-threat against his ultimate with the Black Shield and with Hecarim's Onslaught. I don't actually know the name of that. Onslaught of Shadows. To just deny the engage. So the Skarner pick definitely loses some value into those champions, but if he is able to get these picks like we've had in the past with him, as well as with the Thresh combo, it does provide a lot of team fight usage and anti-team fight for the side of Degenerates.
Game's sitting on a knife edge right now. We're kind of looking almost towards an LCK special down in this gold league, right? 1,000 gold difference at 22 minutes, and really no one's looking to fight at the moment, or 21.5 minutes. Flame Shadow looking for a setup, but they need to find exactly the right pick, I think, for both these teams, which is why they're so afraid of pulling the trigger. They might find Crimvale here. Pandemonium, he's got the unstoppable force, but they don't have the follow-up around. Really make that happen. 40 seconds until the next dragon. This should be the next flashpoint.
Yeah, and even though the team gold is only about 1,000 gap, one key thing to note is that the 80 carry gap is actually 1,000 in favor of Degenerates, which is a lot of your consistent damage in these fights. So if they aren't able to get that initial collapse and burst everyone down with their Malphite, Hecarim, Galio, it
Ghost in. Here comes Kaz. Tries to get the knockback on Crimvale. He's flashing out of the way as Galio gets a one-man knock-up. Crimvale going into the egg form in the meantime as Fox Zero tries to do damage from the backside of the fight. Gets the pullback. Dump truck taken down. His Hardstuck brother ends up getting the kill credit. And here comes the Featherstorm. It's a little bit too late from the unstoppable force as Kaz is taken down to half health. Now Fox Zero kiting out of the way. Gets the pullback. Root onto 2. Pandemonium tries to get his way out of the fight, as is Hardstuck brother. By Hardstuck brother getting out, I mean he's getting back onto Pandemonium. 4 for 1 in favor of Degenerates Reformed. This is what happens when you don't make your combos work from Florida State. Degenerates Reformed just roll over that fight.
Yeah, and we saw that they used so much of the Hecarim and the Malphite combo to try and get down on that Anivia, and that while they were successful, they had nothing left in the tank to try and deny that Xayah from doing so much damage, and she's the true carry threat of this squad in the current moment. She has the most gold by over 3,000, or by almost 3,000. Now only 2 after the turret.
She's got LDR as well, so really piercing through these tanks at the moment with that percent armor reduction, as well as the Anivia with the completed Leandry instrument starting to get towards that 2-item spike. Very, very nice on her. However, she's got an early stopwatch, so might opt to go for the Zhonya's Hourglass before the Archangel Staff, which I generally would not agree with in this particular situation. I think you need the Archangel Staff to be more useful in fights. Especially, stopwatch first is always odd to me because of how good Seekers is. Even with the reduced armor gain that it gives you, it's still the better item, I think, to start with if you're not going to use the stopwatch immediately. Applying it. Which being completed on Hardstuck brother in the meantime.
Yeah, and you know we see that the Kayle is going more towards this AP focused build, which is actually really important because of how much of a threat the Xayah is. So it creates this sort of error where the tanks don't know what they have to do, because the Xayah is going to be shredding them, and she has so much damage, and she already has armor shred. But then that Kayle, she's starting to ramp up, she's starting to do a lot of damage, and most of her damage is actually magic with the Nashers plus Lich Bane combo.
Yeah, this is getting a little bit hairy for Florida State now, down about at this 25-minute mark, and this is where Galio starts falling off a cliff. He has a lot of damage in the mid game, but he hasn't been able to use it a lot. And so now they're waiting for this Tristana to come back online. She's got an item and a half, but she's a full item down on Fox Zero. That can be very, very devastating, as Fox Zero is very close to the Infinity Edge. For the Xayah, that 3-item spike, very, very strong. Meantime, though, Crimvale flying a little bit forward, gets a stun down, rocket jump forward, but the flank is going to be dismantled as the box goes down. And Anivia getting quite a bit of damage in with a wall combo. And it's 2 kills going over quickly to Degenerates Reformed. This is a team in playoff form, if I do say so myself. Once again, looking for at least 3 wins on the night to guarantee themselves a playoff berth. And they're looking towards their first win of the night here. Pick up the Baron in the meantime.
Yeah, and they're playing so well around this Skarner Thresh, which we said really requires them to play around picks, which they've been doing so very well. We see Thresh here trying to deny the Hecarim from getting in there for a steal, and they do secure the Baron.
So with this, they should be able to start really hammering home the sideline pressure from this Kayle. She is on 2 items, still doesn't have a mythic to her name, but still gets sideline pressure very, very easily with combo. And start setting up for the 1-4 with the Baron buff about now.
Yeah, looks like Xayah might just be trying to farm up to get that little bit of extra gold so she can complete her Infinity Edge. And then she'll be very, very strong as they group up for that 1-4, as we said. They're going to be trying to get these picks, as well as start sieging the outer turrets and the inner turrets to get all the standing gold on the map that they can with this Baron buff.
Something I've noticed, though, Florida State's drafted a Wombo combo, and they haven't actually executed on it at all this game. We see, I think, Flame Shadow being a little bit too early or a little bit too late on some of these heroes' entrances, and it's costing them quite a bit, these fights. Ulting on top of Kaz instead of Pandemonium as well. So might be a bit of a mistake. I think generally you want Pandemonium to be your primary engage. You ult on top of him as Kaz goes in with the ult. And so what happens is, since Galio has such a wind-up time, you end up getting Malphite into Hecarim into Galio, even though you're ulting on top of Malphite as soon as he ults. So they need to get this Wombo down. That's basically all I'm saying. They're not.
Yeah, and not only that, but they also need to make sure that the two threats that are the biggest to them right now are that Xayah and that Kale. And when they're using everything on the Anivia, who now has a stopwatch, it makes it really hard for them to actually win the fights, even if they do get that good wombo, if it's only onto someone like the Anivia.
Pandemonium looking for a flank in the meantime, but Crimvale and company are playing around that a bit. About a minute left on the Baron buff as that mid T2 and top T2 have gone down to the 1-4. Kaz, pop the ghost, might look for Crimvale. This is the same target again. Galio finally ulting on top as Kaz goes to the backline, trying to find his way to Fox Zero. But Crimvale, he's popped into the zone, he's Hourglass. Kaz is dead. Fox Zero getting damage in. Pandemonium diving in, but he gets taken away by Fox Zero. Zanivia has respawned. Crimvale finally taken out. Pandemonium flashing out of the way, tries to get damage in onto the enemy support. Finally does, but at the cost of everyone else on his team. Florida State go down in that fight. Ace for 2, and Hardstock Brother split pushing away, should be able to actually pick up the game as the Dragon is taken for good measure. Baron split push very, very strong, and the 4v5 went over to Degenerates reformed. They will take game number 1 of this best of 2 set.
Yeah, and we saw in that fight, the biggest impact was that they weren't able to get on Fox Zero, and he was able to just shred through the Hecarim first, and then the Malphite, and then from then on, the fight was over just because of how much damage the Xayah was able to put out. And it was really a great showing from Degenerates in that early game through their bot lane, actually taking a wonderful trade at level 2, and then transitioning that into just playing a really well overall game from the AD carry. So going into the second game of the series, we're obviously hoping to see a similar performance coming out of Fox Zero. He was able to dish out so much damage. His build path was very strong, going for the LDR second, knowing that he's into this triple melee, triple tank sort of team composition, even though Galio isn't necessarily building all that armor. It just helps shred, and he's going into these melee team comps, and he's understanding that if he can just live, he can dish out so much damage, and he can be such a threat. And with that being said, we also know that Hardstruck Brother was able to do a lot of work on this Kale, even though he wasn't in the fights. And they actually ended up winning that game, technically, off of the split push, because while that final fight was ensuing, we did know that the Kale was on the top lane and did end up taking the game for them. So I definitely think that those are probably the two biggest players to be looking at. As well as the synergy and pick potential that we saw from the Skarner and Thresh combination. If we see something similar like that in the next game, it would make a lot of sense. But we definitely want to see Fox Zero and Hardstuck on the two carry positions. I think for game 2, they need to just reevaluate how they need to be taking these fights and how they need to be actually looking at their win conditions, because they were getting a lot of kills on that Hecarim, but he is the tank Hecarim, and then every time that they were going into the fights, they weren't able to actually get on the Xayah, as well as falling behind in the early game because of taking that level 2 poor trade. So they have to reevaluate how they win the games. So they have to reevaluate their drafting a little bit, and maybe their targeting in team fights. And if they can do that, then they can definitely come back and turn this from a 0-2 into a 1-1 for sure.
To go for game number 2 of this best of 2. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.